This video is brought to you by Tendies, but more on that in a bit. So about a year ago, the Federal Reserve decided to change its stance on inflation. They went from, hey, inflation is nothing to be taken seriously, it's completely transitory, all the way to, oh my god, inflation is Will Smith and Jada Pinkett, it should be avoided like the plague. Pretty much absolutely going to war against inflation. Now, I've made a lot of videos throughout the past year saying that a recession will be a consequence of that policy change. And it's been a whole year and the recession is still not here. Look, we had a technical recession, I can say that, but it's not really a recession. True, we had 2 negative quarters of GDP, which is technically a recession, but not really. Look at the numbers. Unemployment is at 3.4%. That's a historically low number. It's maximum employment pretty much. Consumer spending, all-time highs. We've been only going up in consumer spending for the past 18 months. In fact, we're now almost 10% higher consumer spending than we were at pre-pandemic levels. So people are spending more, unemployment is in the toilet. I mean, there is no recession. So was I wrong? Now look, in this video, I always will do the same thing I do in every freaking video, which is going to give you the bottom line first, because maybe you don't have time to watch the entire analysis and I respect your time. So the bottom line is, sorry, the recession is coming and I will show exactly how fast and how bad it will be, but that will have to wait for the full analysis. Now, if you just want the bottom line, here it is. Now look, let's talk about what happened in the past year. Now, in the past year, we had the Federal Reserve go and absolutely max out interest rate hikes. They've increased interest rates by 4.5% in 1 year. We haven't seen this pace of increase since the Paul Volcker days in the 80s. That's extremely aggressive. And a lot of people expected to see an immediate response in the market because when you hike interest that bad, that fast, you expect the market to be on the verge of collapse. But as I just mentioned, nothing has collapsed. Unemployment is pretty much fine. Consumer spending is pretty much fine. Even the housing market is holding pretty much fine. We have issues with commercial real estate, but that has to do more with change of patterns and working away from home than anything else. The housing market is fine. We just got the median price this year versus last year down by 0.6%. I mean, it's pretty much flat. So there hasn't been a housing crash. There hasn't been an employment crash. Consumers are still spending. Everything is Gucci, right? Maybe there isn't a hard landing. Maybe there's a soft landing. Maybe there's a no landing. Well, let me clue you in on the uncomfortable truth here because none of this shit is true. So here's a few things most people don't understand about the situation. The first thing you have to understand is although we did speak about interest rates and the way they've gone up aggressively, well, the Fed hasn't really gone full throttle on reducing its balance sheet. We went down from 9 to 8.3, which is a significant drop. But looking at pre-pandemic levels, we were $3.5 trillion. So we're still more than double in the balance sheet. And until that drops off, we're going to have a propped up stock market and a propped up economy. I don't know if the Fed actually will do it ever because at this point they seem comfortable just letting it roll off and that might be the case. But if they ever decide to pull that lever, it's going to be absolutely insane. It's going to be pandemonium. And about jobs, look, if you ever ran a business, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. Employing people and firing people isn't a sponge, isn't a button you just click and you add and reduce. It takes time, it costs money, it's not a simple process, especially if you had a hard time hiring these people, training these people, especially if consumer spending is at all-time highs. You're not going to be laying off people because of a recession that might come in the future. Okay, so that covers jobs, but what about the housing market? At this point, we should have seen a shift, we should have seen a drop, we should have seen a collapse. Mortgage rates went up to 7%, all the way from 3% just a year ago. We should have seen prices drop like a stone. Well, not exactly. Look, the housing market has its problems, but the one good thing that happened after 2008, after that crash, is about 80% of people who took mortgages in the past 15 years are sitting on a fixed rate. So they don't care, and their spending power was not diminished by 1 cent because they're paying the same rate they've always paid. The other indicator you should be looking at is new home sales. Now, in new home sales, where you have home builders versus first-time home buyers, that's where you see the elasticity, and there you have a good indicator. According to recent data, about 75% of home builders are now offering a mortgage buydown. Essentially, 75% of home builders are offering to subsidize the mortgage for new purchasers for 3, 4, 5 years, whatever that may be, in order to get them to buy. And that means one thing, the stalemate that we're seeing right now in the housing market, essentially sellers not interested in selling in lower prices, Buyers not interested to pay last year's prices eventually will have to crack. And at this point, the ones that will crack are the sellers, because look at what's going on with new homes that's going to trickle down, and sellers will eventually have to crack, and this will become a buyer's market. At that point, we will have that slowdown that everybody is expecting in the housing market, but it doesn't happen overnight. And let's not forget student debt. People who used to pay hundreds of dollars every month for student debt haven't been paying for a long time. We've been frozen. That few $100s are going back into consumerism, back into spending. Now, until some politician is going to touch this hot potato and is going to make them pay again, this money is going to keep fueling the consumer market. It's just the way it is. There's more disposable income. So here's what's going on. Disposable income is going into retail. Retail is keeping the jobs. People have jobs. They're spending more money. Everything is great. And while this fiesta on the surface is going on, beneath the surface, much like in HBO's Last of Us, there's some problems starting to form. There's a lot of monsters. Look, people will still buy homes, but now they will pay 7% mortgage. People will eventually have to repay student debt. This isn't going to last forever. This is going to eat away at disposable income and reduce consumer spending, hurt retail, eventually leading to job loss. Look at how constrained the system already is. If you look at the car market, which doesn't have fixed interest like the real estate market, you're going to see some really scary things. The average cost of a lease these days for a new car is $700. That's from $400 just 2 years ago. There's about 15% of leases above $1,000. That's 3 times higher than just 2 years ago. It's not that people are buying luxury cars. It's just the cost of goods and the cost of cars are going up beyond what is sustainable. And when 64% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck and can't afford a $400 expense out of the blue, those things will eventually start to add up. And unfortunately, that creates a very dangerous situation. On the one hand, the macro signals are basically sending alarm bells for the Fed. Unemployment, 3.4%. Oh my God, consumer spending, all-time high. Housing, flat. So the Fed is basically going, oh my God, we have to push harder. On the other hand, 2/3 of Americans are unable to squeeze in another $500 per month because they're living paycheck to paycheck. So we have this Fed overreaction potentially coming in because of all the hot numbers coming in. And on top of it, we have people who are unable to pay any more because they're already spread thin. Now, look at the numbers coming out of inflation, not CPI, the other data, PPI, the producer price index. That thing is the raw materials that tells you in advance what's going to happen with CPI. PCE also went up higher than expected. And unfortunately, that creates a significant risk of a Fed overreaction pushing the market into recession. If the Fed decides to push harder on interest rates and push harder on reducing its balance sheet, the housing market, the consumer spending, the student loans, the car market, all of those will push the market down. People will be left without money. Consumer spending will go down. People will lose their jobs, less spending, a vicious cycle leading to a very nasty recession. And unfortunately, this renders the soft landing or no landing scenarios impossible. Look, the Fed is looking at this macro data. It has to either increase rates at a high rate for a longer time and or decrease its balance sheet even further. And that's going to put a lot of pressure on consumers. They're going to be paying more for housing, for cars, for groceries, for student debt, whatever, you name it. Less consumer spending, less retail income, less jobs, leading to a vicious cycle, leading to a recession. Now, hopefully it's going to be a mild recession, but to say that there's a scenario here of no recession, no landing or soft landing, sorry. Now, I do owe everybody a huge apology. I forgot my crystal ball at home today, so I don't know when this is going to happen. That is why it is important for you guys to hedge your position, to manage the risk. There's a lot of different ways to do it. One of them is options. That is why I highly recommend you check out today's sponsor, Tendies. Now, Tendies is a 100% free platform. It's not only about options, you also get free research, which is some of the best online, and it is absolutely free. Their options tools are some of the best in the game, and they're absolutely free. Now, there's a lot of different options tools out there, some of them free, mostly it's bare bones. This is some of the best tools I've seen, and they are absolutely free. You get Options Flow, you get a calculator, which is pretty much on par with everything I've ever saw. And again, it is 100% free. I use it every day for the research. A lot of my community are using this for the options. This thing is absolutely a no-brainer. Check it out for free. Try it. And if you like it, keep using it for free. So filter out the noise. Go get Tendies right now. Thank me later. The link is below.